Hey, what's up guys? I'm Theo Joe, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can drastically increase the battery life of your phone, probably more than doubling it, and it doesn't matter whether you're using an iPhone or an Android phone, both will work. We're basically going to use some household items to reduce the amount of wasted energy outputted by the battery so it will last much longer. I'll be explaining what you need to do this, which really isn't that much, and then how it works, and of course show you how to do it. And it's actually surprisingly simple, so stay tuned, I think you're going to like it. First, for a little bit of background understanding, let me explain how modern cell phone batteries work. You see, inside every phone, you obviously have a battery which supplies power to every component in the phone, whether it be the CPU, the RAM, the GPU, all that. Connecting all these components are a series of very small and complex wire systems called microcircuits, similar to what you'd expect with a typical copper wire circuit, but much smaller. And because phone manufacturers want phones to be as slim and thin as possible these days, they often use the bare minimum amount of insulation around these circuits as necessary. However, this causes a slight problem, because we know from basic E&M physics that any wire with a current going through it will have an induced electromagnetic field around that wire. This can't be avoided completely, but it does mean that some of the electromagnetic energy, which normally would be used to power the phone, will be lost to the magnetic field. You see, with proper insulation, the magnetic field around the wire is heavily suppressed. The insulation essentially blocks some of the field and redirects it back into the wire so it can be used. Therefore, all the energy put into the wire actually does reach its intended destination. But if it's not properly insulated, the magnetic field will dissipate its energy into the phone's outer housing, other components, or somewhere else where it's just wasted. And this is the case for basically all modern smartphones on the market today. That's why older big phones seem to have a much longer lasting battery, because they didn't worry about getting the phone so thin so they had proper insulation. However, not all is lost. If we can find a way to add insulation ourselves to the phone, we can block that wasted energy, meaning the battery life will last much longer. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. So now that you know what needs to be done, let's get into how we can create our own insulation. And you're really only going to need a few basic household items. First, of course, you're going to need your phone and a case that goes along with it. Then you're going to need a piece of basic printing paper, the thicker the better, but it doesn't really matter. Then you're going to need some basic tinfoil, doesn't matter if it's stick or non-stick, and also some regular tape. And finally, you'll need to get a pair of scissors and a ruler or a tape measure. That may all sound strange, but don't worry, I'm going to show you exactly what you need to do, and then it'll all make sense. So first, let me explain how we're going to use these items. In a nutshell, we're going to use the tinfoil's properties as a conductor to reflect and block some of the magnetic waves that normally would be wasted in the phone. So instead of the electromagnetic field escaping out the back of the phone, the most vulnerable point, we can arrange the tinfoil to redirect it back into the phone to be used. However, simply slapping some tinfoil onto the back of the phone won't be enough. We need to actually orient the tinfoil so it follows along the magnetic wave lines so it can be reflected properly. Since the phone is vertical, we can assume that most of the electrical current will flow from top to bottom or vice versa. Since magnetic fields are always perpendicular to the current that induces them, we can use horizontal strips of tinfoil so they'll be in the same direction as that field. And using Gauss's law, we know that when an inductor, in this case the tinfoil, is exposed to a magnetic flux, it induces a current related to the surface area of the surface. I won't get too far into the math on calculating the size of the strips, but we do want the strips close together, just not touching, to optimize the flow of the field. And if we use strips that are about ½ an inch wide, that should perform nicely. So now we know what needs to be done. We're going to use carefully shaped strips of tinfoil that will prevent the wasted energy from going outside the phone. But enough talk. Now let's go over to the table and I'll demonstrate what you need to do. Alright, so here we have all the materials we're going to need. We got the tinfoil, scissors, tape, a tape measure, and some paper. We also have the phone and the case. We don't really need the phone right now, so we can just deal with all this stuff. Now the first thing you want to do is we're going to kind of make a template for where to put the strips of tinfoil so it can fit easily into the case, which will block out all the extra magnetic waves. So what you want to do is simply cut out a piece of paper that is about the same size as the case. It doesn't have to be perfect, you can always trim it later. Maybe we'll start off a little bit larger than we need to, and then adjust it accordingly. So we can get this out of the way. And now we can see it's a little bit big, so we can just cut it maybe right there, like this. Still needs to be a bit thinner. And that fits pretty well. And what you might also want to do is do a cutout for where the camera and anything like that might be, just so you don't cover all that up when it's in the case. And it wouldn't have much of an effect. It won't reduce the efficiency that much. Okay, and that looks perfect. All right, so this is going to basically be our template that we're going to attach the tin foil strips to, so just make sure it fits in the case. So next we want to get the tin foil, and we're going to cut 1/2 inch wide strips. So let's clear this out first. So to do this with the tin foil, what you might want to use is a marker. It's not necessary, but it might make it easier, just so we can more easily cut. And you can just mark about every 1/2 inch down the tin foil. Just make a little mark or a notch or anything. It doesn't really matter. One there, one there. And then also to make it easier again, what we can do is fold this right in half. And then we can basically get double for each cut. So it's less work for us. Or you know what, even fold it again. And that should make it very easy. And we can just cut at each mark. And every time, since we folded it twice, we'll get about 4 strips. So that should make it very easy. Probably don't even need all these marks, but for the sake of efficiency, we can do that. All right, so we definitely have more than we're going to need. And at this point, you just want to cut these into strips and make them longer than you need, because we're going to cut them down closer to the size we need in a bit. So just keep cutting these. And like I said, what we're going to do is cut them down to size. We want it to go all the way across, so don't cut it any shorter than that. And then we can keep cutting these. And depending on how many times you fold it, or if you were to go the long ways, there would probably be more that you could get out of it. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. And these don't have to be exactly 1/2 inch across. As long as they're pretty close to each other and a 1/2 inch, it'll be fine. It's not like this is exact science. So now we have a pretty good number of strips. And what we want to do is we're going to need, let's see how many we'll need. All right, so we're probably going to need like 8 or 9. And then what we want to do is figure out how long the case is so we can kind of get a better idea. Looks like it's about 2.5 inches across is how long we're going to want each strip. So let's measure out one of these and cut it to size, and then we'll use that as to get an idea for the rest of them. And then what we can do is just stack all these on top of each other and then cut it to the same size as that first one. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm lining up the end of each one to the first one, and then once we have enough, we'll just cut them all at once, and then we know they will be the exact same length, or at least pretty darn close. All right, so here they're all stacked up, or at least enough. And I should mention, before you cut them all, maybe make sure that they do fit in correctly, and yes, that does fit correctly. So we can just make sure these are all lined up with the first one. There we go. And now all these in my hand will be the correct length. And then we can start putting them into the phone. Yep, they're all pretty good length. We can just tape them in there. So what you'll probably want to do is first take out this piece of paper, of course. And as you can see, the shape doesn't really matter. This is kind of cockeyed, but it doesn't really matter. And we can just start taping these on to the piece of paper using the regular tape. So what you want to do is start at the very bottom. So the bottom piece will be flush with the bottom. And then for each next strip, you want to get as close to the bottom strip below it as possible without touching, because we're going to want to fit as many of these as we can. So you can kind of see it's very close, maybe an eighth of an inch or less to that. So these aren't going to be touching. They're not going to conduct anything between them. And theoretically, if you did tape over it completely, so even if they were touching perhaps, that they wouldn't conduct electricity between them, but we don't really want to take any chances. So just get as close as you can, and we'll see how many we can fit on here. So right now we've got about 4, and then I'll show you what you can do once we get to the cutout, because it will be a little bit different. And also you'll notice on some of these they don't exactly reach all the way across, but that's okay. We mostly want to cover just the center of the phone because that is where all the circuits are going to be. If the edges aren't covered as much, it won't really matter. You're not going to ever get 100% efficiency, so this will be good enough and still much better than what the phone was doing before, so it doesn't really matter. Now, once you get to the cutout, all you want to do is just cut these to size, however wide each side is. So for this, it looks like about that long, even if it's closer to square. And these have to be a lot less precise anyway. Just kind of eye it. And it might be easier if you attach the tape to the piece of tin foil first and then stick it on, so then you don't have to delicately handle it as much. It's a bit easier. Now you might be thinking why you don't just tape this vertically to cover it all up. And like I mentioned before, you have to have them horizontal because they need to be perpendicular to the electromagnetic field lines. If we did that, then it would just conduct up and down. We don't want to do that. It has to be side to side. Unfortunately, it's a little bit more work, but we can do it. And finally, what you might want to do is tape along the edge just so they kind of stay in place. That way it doesn't come up and just makes it easier to handle. Okay, so now that you have this template thing with the tin foil and the paper, to put it into the phone, what you're going to want to do is actually face it inwards into the case, and that's just so the tin foil doesn't touch the phone and scratch it or conduct anything like that. And just thinking about this now, it seems like I kind of did this in the reverse for the cutout, so I can adjust that right now. So now it looks pretty good. Fits right in there. And now that you have this all set up, all you need to do is put your phone into it normally like you would, and it shouldn't be too much thicker so you won't even notice it. And again, what's happening is when you put the phone in there, the battery is sending energy throughout the phone, and it's going to create these micro electromagnetic field lines that are not even noticeable. They're barely perceptible even if you use some sort of electronic meter. However, it's enough where it's going to be blocked by these strips of tinfoil and then redirected back into the phone so they can be used to power all your apps, games, all that sort of stuff. So we can just slip this back in and you'll see, can't even notice that it's in there at all. Looks completely normal. And that's it. Your phone should be much more battery efficient at this point. Okay, so that's all you need to do. However, you may be wondering just how well this is going to work. So why don't we do a quick test? And Android does have a nifty feature that gives you an estimated remaining time of battery life, so we can know exactly how much of an increase in battery life this trick will give us. So let's head back to the table and we'll test it out. Alright, so at this point we want to do a test because we want to know exactly how well this worked or if it even worked at all. So why don't we check out the estimated remaining battery without this little trick, and then we'll do it before. So right now it's pretty fully charged, and as you can see it has 14 hours, 13 minutes remaining, and we want to see what it says for remaining if we were to put this trick on. So we can just do that. And now that should basically instantly increase the efficiency. We give it a few seconds to make sure that it refreshes, and then we can just go ahead and check it out now and see what it says. And okay, wow, all right, so it more than doubled. You can see it says now 29 hours and 40 minutes. Before it was about 14 hours, so double would have been 28. So this clearly worked. We got a huge increase in battery, and this 99% of battery is going to last much longer now because we were able to increase it with that trick. So this is a really great result. So there you have it. With just some basic tinfoil and paper, you're able to possibly double the performance of your battery. And as I mentioned before, this should really work on any type of phone. Although keep in mind, the older the phone, the less difference this will probably make because batteries become less efficient over time in general. Still, this should make a big difference either way, and I think you'll be happy with the result. So I'd be interested to hear if this worked for you guys. Let us know down in the comments section how much of an increase you got, and perhaps if you're using an iPhone or Android, maybe we can get an idea of which phones it works best on. Also, if you guys did enjoy this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up so I know you liked it. If you guys want to keep watching, I've got some other videos I think you'll like on the right hand side. You can just click those or look in the description for the same link like if you're on a phone. And if you want to subscribe, I make new videos multiple times a week, so I think it should be worth it. I'll be looking forward to hearing from you guys, so as usual, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.